Welcome everyone to Thales College. If we haven't met yet, I'm Peter Forrest. I'm the provost here. And welcome to the second lecture of 4 in this year's Sydney and Cecile Smith Lectures on Virtue. Our next lecture in the series will be in February and will be given by Dr. Ken Calvert, Professor of History at Hillsdale College, who will give a lecture tentatively titled Christian Citizenship in the Roman World, Lessons for Modern Americans. That's going to be on Thursday, February 13th. So the observant among you might realize that's the day before Valentine's Day. So you can plan a romantic date to come listen to a lecture on early Christian martyrs. It's going to be great. Please be on the lookout for details. So we'll be sending out emails about that sort of after Christmas to remind you of that. The final lecture of the year will be in April when our friend Stephen Smith, who's also a professor at Hillsdale, will return. He gave a lecture last year. He'll come back and his lecture is going to be on Shakespeare. So that's going to be great. Tonight, I want to say a special thank you to the founder of Thales College, Mr. Robert Luddy, and to Miss Christine Smith, whose generous donation in honor of her parents has made this lecture series possible. And it is my pleasure and privilege to welcome our lecturer this evening, Dr. Catherine Ruth Pakaluk, Director of Social Research and Associate Professor at the Catholic University of America. Dr. Pakaluk joined the faculty at the Bush School of Business at CUA in the summer of 2016 and is Associate Professor of Political Economic Thought. Formerly, she was Assistant Professor and Chair of the Economics Department at Ave Maria University. Her primary areas of research include economics of education and religion, family studies and demography, Catholic social thought, and political economy. Dr. Pakaluk is a widely admired writer and sought-after speaker on matters of culture, gender, social science, the vocation of women, and the work of Edith Stein. She lives in Maryland with her husband, Michael Pakaluk, and 8 children. The Smith Lectures on Virtue is an annual lecture series at Thales College that aims to explore different themes and facets of virtue, but always with an eye towards application, applying what we've learned to our lives and to our own times in 21st century America. Shortly before his death in 1977, the great 20th century German Catholic philosopher Dietrich von Hildebrand asked his wife Alice, 34 years his junior, "Do you know what the key to happiness is?" Now, when a great mind like that asks a question like that, you sit up and take notice. Here's his answer in a word: gratitude. Reflecting on this truth decades later, on the occasion of her 90th birthday, Alice von Hildebrand explained, "Gratitude is basically a response to the goodness of another person, primarily the goodness of God." Which I think is a really important point, right? Because I think to our detriment, we often forget that God is a person. Gratitude is the response to the goodness of another person, primarily the goodness of God. We should wake up in the morning thanking God for existing, for his existence, and for our faith. We should also thank him for all the gifts that he places on our lives. Dr. Pakaluk's talk is titled, "For This Child I Prayed, Motherhood and the Hidden Art of Gratitude." Dr. Pakaluk.
Thank you, Peter, for that great introduction. I wish I'd had that quotation when I wrote these remarks. I might have. That's really excellent. But to put us in the right frame of mind for thinking about gratitude, it's probably important to begin with these thanks. So just a thank you for that kind introduction. I wanted to thank Maria for your work organizing this. Lots of emails that went back and forth. To the members of the college who are here, to the Smith family for making this lecture series possible. To my sons who are here, there are 2 of my sons are here, and they probably are not happy that I've just mentioned them. And they have to hear me talk all the time. But they make me proud every day. And to all the friends and the faculty and the supporters of Thales College, your work here is the most important work that there is. And so thank you for that. And finally to Mr. Robert Luddy, whose entrepreneurial genius is something of an inspiration for my remarks tonight, but more on that in a moment. I won't single you out though. We just have a common interest. All right, so my topic tonight is gratitude, and this is appropriately so, right, as we're one brief week from the great American feast of Thanksgiving, and 2 days away from, just days away, I'm not sure how many days, away from entering into Advent, that period of preparation for the gift of the Incarnation. So I propose to consider what we might learn about gratitude, reflecting on women in contemporary America, like the biblical Hannah, who take their children to be their purpose, their contribution, and their greatest blessing. I'm happy there's at least one baby in the room. So stand up. No. All right. So most Americans are having fewer children, but the dearth of births is not the whole story. Largely hidden from popular view, there are women around the country having 5, 6, even 7 or more children. Perhaps you are one of them, or perhaps you know one of them. The Census Bureau estimates that 5% of women aged 40 to 44 have 5 or more children today, 5%. And this works out to about 500,000 women, without counting the ones who are older. In my age bracket, 5% of my age bracket also has 5 or more children. Nearly 1% of these age brackets has 7 or more children. So while the number of women having 5 or more has declined from 20% in the 1970s, it did not continue to fall after 1990. The 5% has remained relatively constant since then. So this 5% are sort of strangely immune from this trend to lower birth rates. And so from January to September of 2019, I went in search of this 5% of American women quietly defying the birth dearth, I say, to find out why they do what they do and what they think it means for themselves and for their families and the future of the nation. In my remarks tonight, I want to draw from their narratives to outline something of what I might call a natural philosophy of gratitude. I'm going to draw a little bit on economic theory, also from sacred scripture and from tradition, but most heavily on their testimonies. I will aim to go beyond what we already know, that a grateful heart gives thanks in word and deed. I will aim to characterize what acts are proper to gratitude, which ones are preparatory and which ones come after. So this isn't an idle exercise. I didn't have to work very hard to pull out of my research what I'm going to share with you tonight. The stories that I heard on my travels interviewing all of these women were laden with the language of gift. Angela, a Catholic mom of 5, said, "It's just such a beautiful gift I could not have imagined. I did not grow up a baby person. I did not grow up around children, so it never occurred to me, while I wanted to have them, it wasn't a felt need. You know, I would love to have a baby." Well, not really. It was just, well, I'll have kids someday. That's it. But it's such a joy. Oh my gosh, having children is such a joy. I do feel that it's something God is doing for me. Something, such a tremendous gift that I can't believe I get to have them. So the moms that I met used this language of blessing, of divine gift, just as readily. So Esther, a Jewish mom of 9, told us, "You know, my understanding is that all blessings come from God. And the 3 big blessings that we talk about in Judaism are children who bring us pride and joy and follow in tradition, and good health and financial sustenance. I don't feel like you could ever have too much of any of those things. These are blessings. They're God's expressions of goodness. We can put up roadblocks not to get the blessings, but those are the blessings. And sometimes we need to ask God to make us proper vessels to receive the blessings, but those are the biggest blessings," she said. To understand gratitude, one has to begin with the possibility of being gifted, favored with a good or a grace out of relation to one's deserts. And what better course of study for this than mothers who see their children as gift? Not materialistic byproducts of a reproductive act, but as miracles beyond measure. What insights about gratitude might we take away from these quiet mothers all around the country who are a model for us of this special act of gratitude? I think to many jaded ears today, reflections on gratitude, especially around Thanksgiving, might seem trite and maybe even banal. But I'm not going to hear of that, no matter how close we are to the dark of winter. To suppose that gratitude is boring is to get it exactly backwards. Young and old, then, I want to invite you in the next few minutes into a rather enchanted world where every day is Christmas, where animals talk and snowflakes never melt. Because it's gratitude that opens for us this world of deep magic, of elves and centaurs and hobbits and wizards and fairy tales that are true. But why is that the case? So I'm going to start with a case study. This is a little bit of the story of a woman named Rosalie. I could have picked any story for what I'm about to tell you from my book, but I picked Rosalie because this will do. And you'll see why. Now, I have to confess as I get into this material, I am going to do my best not to become overly emotional. But I feel a little bit like it's coming to me because last week at the Religious Freedom Institute dinner in Washington, one of the speakers became very emotional, and I was a little bit critical. So, so I really have it coming to me. If I get a little teary-eyed, I hope somebody has a tissue for me. But we'll see. Maybe I can hold it together. All right. So Rosalie was a cheerful Filipino mom of 9 children, and she was on the West Coast, I think in Los Angeles. She told us about her disabled son. Her 7th son, the son had a chromosomal abnormality, and she told us about him. And so her story illustrates what I think are 3 principal notes of gratitude that I want to draw out for tonight. And those 3 notes are discovery, kind of a certain type of insight, receptivity, and creativity. So I'm going to take those in turn. And so Rosalie said, this is her testimony. She said, number 7 is our special needs son. He was born with a chromosomal abnormality, an addition and a deletion. I've researched him, but there's no one that matches him that has the same similarities as him. So it's been very difficult time since he was born because we lived in the hospital, myself and my son. So the children at home literally had to take care of one another, not because anyone told them to, but they just knew that was the norm of what they needed to do. And they stepped up, cooking more and laundry more, because Dad had to go to work and Mom had to be at the hospital. And I think having the 7th one was very difficult in terms of not having Mom home all the time. But because you have a large family, you don't feel like someone took something away from you. If anything, they were excited to have that other sibling to come home to see how he was. And they learned so much with this sibling. They had to come with me to every appointment after he was released to come home with us. And so I would take everyone to cardiology, and they would do an EKG, and they would stand against the wall, and I'd have the cardiologist explain everything that was on the EKG. And I would tell him, this is my kid's field trip. Explain what you're doing and walk them through it. It was the same when we would do an x-ray. It would be the same thing. We were constantly in a hospital, and everybody, so to speak. So they all learned, and they built the relationship to take care of their brother. He was on a G-tube, and they all learned how to be part of that, to help him, to change his feedings, to be more like a doctor, like a nurse. There were many times that I asked to have a nurse live with us, that I was asked to have a nurse live with us to help take care of him. But I didn't see a need for it because his siblings did it all. And the therapist came to our home. He did therapy at our home. And it was more the kids. The doctors and the specialists would say, he's improving, but not necessarily from the therapists who come once or twice a week, but the children, what do they do? And I said, well, I asked them whatever the homework is from the therapist, and I put it up on the wall. If it's to flip the baby over, whoever is passing by, flip the baby. It's flip your brother again, flip him again, because he needed to build upper body strength. So it's a special kind of tummy time. Everybody would pick a task to do to help the brother. And then, now hear it. If anything, number 7 was that best gift to bring our family even tighter together, to grow in charity. Okay, so the first note of gratitude is discovery. It's a kind of discovery there. Rosalie sees that her 7th baby is a gift, a blessing, not in spite of his disability, but because of it. His needs were opportunities for them to love, and these acts of love drew her family closer together. And it's all the more powerful since a disabled baby is normally considered a great burden. Rosalie isn't drawing an ordinary conclusion. Rather, she's discovering something extraordinary. Baby number 7, with all his special needs, saved her children from disabilities of the soul. Therapists could only flip him so many times per week, but his siblings could flip him all day long, morning and night, every time they passed, without knowing it or intending it. And Rosalie's children became habituated to doing things for each other as a character trait and not a performance. It was just as it was true for her children, Rosalie argued, it was true of herself. She said, it was gradual, I think. If you planted a seed in me, I think now you can see that it's grown little by little. And maybe I grow out this way sometimes and not directly up, but I'm learning and I'm asking so many people for help. She's discovered something extra, something surplus, something hidden, more than meets the eye. Rosalie is alert to the possibility of value, of goodness, where it could have been missed from a worldly point of view. So she discovers a gift where others might have failed. She said, number 7 was that best gift, she said. And once discovered, the giver can be acknowledged and thanked. But it doesn't end there. Rosalie illustrates the second note of gratitude, receptivity. The gift, once known and once discovered, calls forth an awareness of being a receiver. At this, there is a choice. I align myself with the giver. I accept this gift. Or I don't. This is a most basic and excellent receptivity. I'm not avoiding it or acting as if I'm not a receiver. Or worse, I'm not insensitive to its excellence. Every gift can be spurned. We know this, in fact. Receptivity means seeing the good or the grace as a gift and accepting it as a gift. In Rosalie's case, she accepted not only the child as a gift, but also her capacity to receive life as a gift. She accepted her own receptivity as a gift, receptive to being receptive. Her gratitude for the blessing of number 7 leads directly to number 8. And this is an even more excellent receptivity. She isn't, and this is important, she isn't satiated. She isn't done. She isn't merely aligned with the giver now. She's aligned with the giver in the future. Let it be done unto me according to thy will. It's being aligned in the future. Her gratitude and her joy in the blessing increased her desire to be gifted again with such a blessing. And she said, I think in the back of my head, I know that whatever happens, God will provide. If it's a monetary thing or a mental chaos, God will give you peace. So there hasn't been a question to like, that's enough. No, I think we're still open to life, she said. So continuing her story, she told us about the next baby. Then I got pregnant with number 8. And I remember people slandering me for getting pregnant because they figured you have a special needs child. Why would you have another after him? And that was a big one because I remember thinking, I don't think God would have given me this child if there wasn't a purpose. I'm sorry. And when she was born, because of her, baby number 7 learned how to crawl. Because he wanted to get to that baby that was crying on the other side of the room, he would actually move. And people were astounded because he never moved. He never made a sound. He couldn't speak, nothing. And because of her, he wanted to eat. He never put anything in his mouth, but she was eating. So he learned how to eat. So number 8 helped number 7. Number 9 comes along and same thing. He still wasn't walking. He still couldn't stand. He couldn't do any of that. Now number 9 comes along and it just motivated him more and more to get to that other baby, right? So if anything, she said, I see our family, I could look back on it now. They have helped each other the whole way through. I think when you're in it, maybe it's not as organized as you want it to be, but you're growing in the chaos. And I can step back and look at it, and I'm like, this is an amazing gift that everybody has been able to help each other in some simple way. So finally, following the first 2, discovery, receptivity, gratitude opens the door to a new creation, a participation with God in gracing the world with new blessings. First, concretely, Rosalie's receptivity led to 2 more children. Second, those children, gifts in themselves, gave to her baby what nobody else could give him: the will to move, the will to eat, to stand and to walk. Rosalie's 8th and 9th babies had unexpectedly saved her 7th baby from aspects of his chromosomal abnormality. As Rosalie described it, it was a festival of grace, gifts upon gifts, blessings upon blessings, which reminded me of that passage, good measure, pressed down, running over. And she almost paraphrased it. She told us, you don't really need much when you have a big family because you have each other. In her language, she said, that overfills the cup, she said. She said, that's what I'm thinking when I look back on everything, the joy, the childhood joy. Her gratitude began with noticing, then accepting and receiving, and finally, because of her receiving, more gift. And the cycle begins again: discovery, receptivity, and new creation. Her case perfectly illustrates those 3 notes of the hidden art of gratitude found in my work with mothers. These 3 pieces: discovery, receptivity, and creativity. So let's move from the particular to the general. Rosalie's case study is just that. It's not just babies we're supposed to see as blessings. Children are special gifts, almost sacramental in the way that they are in the flesh a realization of a spiritual truth. The real gift of a person is not reducible to the material body. So children show us literally what it means to be blessed at all. That's why they're a special guide to gratitude. It's also why a world lacking children becomes quickly disenchanted. Children train us to see the world as gift. In fact, the entire world is pregnant with gift if we're prepped for discovery. So some of you may have seen where this is going, but there's an economic framework that is very helpful here. We are indebted to the insights of economist Israel Kirzner for helping us to see that entrepreneurial activity begins long before the creation of value. Rather, he talked about a habit of alertness to the possibility of profit, which puts an entrepreneur in a frame of mind to make surprise discoveries. This discovery for an entrepreneur takes the form of seeing something extraordinary, like Rosalie, that already known ordinary resources might be recombined into a new extraordinary good or service brought to market. Entrepreneurship is to the temporal economy what gratitude is to the divine economy. It's a kind of engine of growth. The end result of the activity of the entrepreneur is creation. Participation in God's creation, we sometimes call it co-creation. So entrepreneurs are responsible for certain kinds of magic, new things, better things, wonders and types of miracles. Gratitude likewise transforms the ordinary world into a world where we encounter the magic of gift, blessing, grace, wonders, and miracles, but not a static world only, a dynamic one in which gratitude for blessings received leads to more blessings through the fiber of reality. Contrast the language and the posture of discovery with that of invention. A discoverer finds what is already there. He isn't a creator of value so much as its finder. He's the recipient of a facet of reality that presents itself to him as a gift, a reward for his searching, yes, but out of proportion to his efforts, his abilities, and his capacities. Consider, it is precisely that entrepreneurial discovery of value appears to have been gratis, discovered rather than invented, that leads some to argue that business profits should just belong to everyone. On the contrary, the value is due to the person who discovers it, the finder, who sees the extraordinary in the ordinary. And this is why it's a gift. True discovery is humble in that sense. It's not proud. I didn't invent this. I found it, and it's received like a gift. Likewise, gratitude begins with the discovery of a gift, not an invention of one's own making. We can't be grateful for what we do not see and receive personally. Thus, we must see it. I must see it. And it must be I who sees it. Gifts are necessarily personal. They may be common goods. They may be received by two or more of us and not diminish in our sharing them. But gratitude arises as a response to something personal, something for me. I'm in receipt of something. It is I, and I am indebted. I must receive or not receive. I must give thanks, and I must seek to discharge my debt of gratitude. All right, so this leads to an important thing we have to clear away. Gifts are not free. The virtue of gratitude makes this very clear. Gratitude is the habit of noticing the goodness in a good for me personally that more or less exceeds what I paid for it. We can be grateful, and we should be grateful for things that are not gifts in the ordinary sense, like things that people give us without payment. In other words, we can and should be grateful for things that we buy or things that people owe us, as much as for things given to us without payment. So what do I mean by this? Well, in any market exchange, the value to me personally vastly exceeds what I've paid for it. And for instance, it includes the recognition, just as a recent example, that $4.50 cannot possibly represent the full measure of my thankfulness that at 6:31 in the morning on a blustery day last week, walking on a pier, and a recent visit to Newport Beach, California, I could walk into Hearst Coffee Roasters and find 6:31 in the morning, I'm not a morning person, and find men and women ready to serve me a very fine cup of coffee, a drink that made my sunrise walk along the beach truly magical. Why were they there? Why was my paltry handful of dollars enough to bring them there, enough to produce these eager servers, enough for an entrepreneur to take the risk of opening a shop on that corner, enough for him to devote himself to roasting coffee, right? $4.50. So there's a miracle there, a surplus value that I did not pay for. Only an ingrate, I think, or someone very insensitive to the miracle of it would fail to skip out of the coffee shop in the morning, overwhelmed with gratitude. I was very overwhelmed. The $4.50 had nothing to do with the value of that exchange to me. That exchange is pure Christmas magic. Well, I really like coffee, so for me personally, gratitude in that instance requires, if I don't do it, I've failed something. So it requires, first, the very hearty thanks to the servers and to the staff. Second, a grateful heart disposed to thank God for making all good things possible, including the goods of the marketplace that serve me so well. Third, an orientation to seeking and fostering other good exchanges in the future in proportion as those exchanges serve higher ends. My obligation to the other party and to the ultimate giver is not remotely discharged because I paid for that coffee. I mean, just think about that for 1 minute, right? That would be kind of terrible. So this is just so for gifts that are normal gifts, right? Received without payment. We speak of a debt of gratitude precisely because gratitude is not optional. Gifts, in fact, bind the recipient to respond. So this is what I mean by the fiber of reality. Gifts bind the recipient to respond. To fail to give thanks is to do a wrong. So nothing could be sillier than the idea that gifts are free. It's only true in a metaphysical sense that the giver freely gives of his free will, and the giver does not do the binding. There's no contract for that surplus value. It's precisely that it's incommensurate and uncontractable. It's reality that binds the receiver, or natural law, we might say, not human convention. The first table of the Decalogue, in fact, helps us to see what acts of gratitude God desires when we discover his goodness. God is the origin of all this goodness which we find ourselves in receipt of, right? It's like, I've discovered. Did you ever meet a convert? They've just discovered and they can't believe how good God is. We are therefore indebted to him and bound to give thanks. So we have no other gods. We are never to take his name in vain. We keep Holy the Sabbath, honor our mother and father. These are debts or duties arising because we're indebted to God for the most valuable thing we have, our existence, and the possibility of eternal life with him. So gratitude begins with alertness to the possibility of goodness embedded in reality for us, for me personally, hidden from view, but accessible with a holy imagination. So like Rosalie, we are ready to discover, even in our burdens, gifts of the Almighty. Or like St. Paul, who said, we know all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Another mom named Jen put it this way: I can see, though, even how what we would term as negative, that God has fulfilled his promise to make it work together for good. Like all the miscarriages I had, they had a way of spacing out the children, of making me appreciate the ones that I have even more, and of timing things beautifully. And I love every one of my children, and I know it was just perfectly planned out by God, the ones that we have. And I had wondered whether I was being responsible sometimes because I didn't want to be presumptuous and foolish. But since I did pray over it, and I left the decision up to the Lord, and I consistently seek him, then I had the peace of trusting that he does answer the prayer. So even the things that seem hard, it's just part of his plan. Women like Rosalie and Jen came to see the world as deeply enchanted, but it didn't leave them smug or self-satisfied. It left them eager to bless the Lord. They exclaimed like the biblical Hannah and Mary, the mother of Jesus, in her turn, the Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. God has done this for me. It's personal. They felt bound to praise him and thank him, to take their part in this divine economy, to freely give God what little was theirs to give him. Paradoxically, cultivating discovery of blessing for them led to a greater awareness of being gifted and to a commensurate greater knowledge of indebtedness. From everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required. From the one to whom much has been entrusted, even more will be demanded. Discovery of blessing is exhilarating but also dangerous. To know oneself as loved is to know oneself in chains. Okay, the second point about receptivity. The right response to a gift is not to demur. A good gift, not, a rightly ordered gift, is not to demur, I couldn't accept this gift, give it to someone else. The right response is to be gracious as a receiver. So I like to say that receptivity is the correct response to discovering that a rightly ordered giver wants to give. You don't put the gift on a shelf, one mom named Kim said. And Esther had said, and I already quoted this, I don't feel like you could ever have too much of those things. Those are blessings. They're God's expression of goodness. We can put up roadblocks not to get the blessings, but those are blessings. Earlier, I called this the choice to be aligned with the giver, to the will to be a receiver, and to will the indebtedness that follows. Like, let it be done unto me. No roadblocks. Grateful receptivity in relation to God looks like, if you know the title of a spiritual classic called Abandonment to Divine Providence, this is what receptivity looks like. It's a kind of radical acceptance of the will of God. But there's more. When the giver is God, discovering that we are in receipt of his gifts, that he has blessed us, we're supposed to ask for more gifts. This is funny. It's true. There's some kind of false humility that says don't ask for more gifts. This is not true. We're supposed to want them. We're supposed to really work for them, to prepare for them, to hope for them, and of course to pray for them. Give us this day our daily bread. Our Lord showed us how to pray. It's not greedy or disordered to pray for blessings. I love that line where our Lord says, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that asks you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. We're supposed to ask for these blessings. So Esther stressed, and she had a really nice turn of phrase. Esther, the mom of 9, she said, God's not out to trick us and send us trouble. He really wants to send us blessings. Yes, things don't always turn out the way you might have expected, but children are a great source of blessing, and God wants us to have more blessings and more children, and we should ask for that. But, okay. The women in my study gave witness to this sort of wanting and praying. So Kim talked about being open to children all the time. She said, we were just excited to have the next one, and we always tried. It was active trying, not just we'll see, but really trying. That posture of openness was to children was fairly commonly expressed. Women in my study had adopted a lifestyle of sort of never say never, even if they were actively avoiding children when we spoke with them. They struggled with the language of being done, which they saw as problematic. So Beth was in the Pacific Northwest. She said, the babies came. We thought it was great. It was a miracle. They just show up. There was no calculation anywhere. Now, not all the women felt ready for babies all the time. They needed time to recover and to see when it was right. But even when they were postponing children, they wanted to be in a position to be open again, right? All things being equal, I'd love to have another one. So Hannah, for whom the book is titled, Hannah talked about moments, she said, where it's like, I'm so not ready for another child. And then she went on, that's a vessel that's not ready for it. But then there's a shift. All of a sudden it begins to creep in. Like the question you ask yourself, because in general I want to have more. So I would pray to have the ability to be the vessel to have more. I want to want more. I would pray to want more because sometimes I'm like, I don't want, but I do want to want, This is very deep, right? This is very deep. So even, so this posture of openness, not everybody was open all the time, but when they couldn't be open to it because it was prudent to wait, that was a hardship. It was a hardship because they wanted to want more blessings. This fundamental attitude of openness arises from the lived experience of being blessed or graced with gift. I find myself in possession of a good out of proportion to my own efforts and actions. It's really good. I see that there could be more hidden goodness. So the grateful heart, being unable to repay the value received, finds the highest expression of gratitude as a kind of desire to become a fitting vessel for the gift and for more gift. Not just to receive, but to receive well and to become capable of receiving more. To cultivate receptivity is an act itself, and it becomes a habit. Because receptivity requires corresponding acts of preparation, and because seeking new gifts is also an act and part of gratitude. Just as an entrepreneur will seek new opportunities to create value, a grateful soul will search for more reasons to thank God. So Terry was a Catholic mother of 10 in Denver, and she said, I think that being open to a gift, so, it's always a gift to have a child. So being open to a gift for me, it means that you're trusting God and trusting that this gift is going to come with more than you can imagine, whether it's the personality of that child or what they bring to the family. In the Catholic tradition and many other Christian traditions, we say that the summit of Christian life is the Eucharistic celebration. Now, the Eucharist literally translates as giving thanks. The reception of Jesus in the most holy sacrament is at the same time an act of gratitude, of giving thanks, and an act of openness to receive him, a kind of willing openness. So Terry continued, I guess it's a participation with God, which is unfathomable, that God gives us a choice. And by saying yes, there's a freedom that you were mentioning earlier. That freedom gives us joy and that sense of purpose and that confidence to trust in him, even when it's hard. When it comes to Holy Communion, we do strive to receive worthily, right? To be a fitting vessel. And we do strive to be capable of receiving Jesus again, more and more worthily. We are supposed actually to pray for more. We're supposed to want him in the Eucharist, to really work for that, to prepare for him, to hope for him, and of course to pray to be worthy. Give us this day our daily bread. And if you knew the gift of God and who it is that's asking you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. So the Eucharist closely is related to maternal life, right? Because it's receiving a person into our person. And this provides a model for this mysterious aspect of gratitude. There's little wonder that Terry described an emotional moment after her 9th baby was born. She said, I will say, having my 9th, I remember having her, and instantly, when she was born, we saw that she was a girl, and I turned to my husband, Dan, and I said, "How many more can we have?" Now, of course, likewise, a grateful heart might say of Holy Communion, how many more times can we be united with God? Only a kind of false humility would obscure this. When the giver is God, we are indebted by gratitude to seek actively after reception of his gifts. But as a caution, this is not a prosperity gospel. The grateful heart exercises its capacity to see even hardships as blessings through these countless acts of discovery. Finally, I want to turn to the third note, creativity. As I said, I think of entrepreneurship as to the temporal economy, as gratitude is to the divine economy. So it's the process by which wealth grows. In this case, it's not temporal wealth, but grace, treasure in heaven. In the context of a divine entrepreneurship, we can more easily interpret this passage, which a priest I was at church a few days ago, and a priest said that this was his most difficult passage to interpret in all of Scripture. And I thought, I don't know, it's not that bad. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will grow rich. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. A person who has received blessing from God rightly ventures for God, seeking to turn blessing into more blessing. So the theme here is creativity or creation. Esther had said, my understanding is all these blessings come from God, and we need to ask God to make ourselves proper vessels to receive the blessings. Divine goods are blessings. It's not just okay to desire blessings and to pray for them. We should desire them and pray for them, so long as we're rightly ordered. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. But the logic of divine gifts is quite different from the logic of temporal gifts, and this is something we learned. The women I spoke with told a story of increasing benefits with more children. The rough idea was something like this, that the joy of an additional child reverberated among all the members of the family, especially when older kids reached the early teenage years and beyond. Or you can think of extended family. With more children, there were more people to have and share the joy. And this fact meant that the value they attached to having a child actually increased with more children. Children aren't like a consumption good with diminishing satisfaction. Women reported, in fact, enjoying their thirds and their fourths and their fifths more than their firsts and their seconds, as incredible as that may sound. With ordinary goods, there are only so many that will satisfy. So many cars, so many meals, so many experiences. This is satiation. As we consume more of a thing, we desire less of the thing. Gratification is often immediate, it fades quickly. Returns decrease over time. Divine gifts work in the other direction. There may or may not be initial gratification, right? Some of God's gifts don't initially feel at all good. But sometimes they do. But over time, gratification grows. There's not satiation in the way we see with consumer goods. I don't feel you could ever have too much of these things, Esther had said, right? Why would you be done with that? You want them more. Imagine anyone saying, so try this on, the healthier I've become, the less I desire health. The wealthier I've become, I desire wealth less. Now, sure, you may know someone who desires money less now than when he was young, but money isn't wealth. When a mature person sees that money isn't equivalent to a good life, he isn't desiring wealth less. He's desiring the illusion of wealth less and positioning himself to be truly wealthier. But people do desire children less after having one or two. If children tend to satiate, it's because they're evaluating them on a temporal scale of values, where things are evaluated relative to their use value in relation to other goods. Spiritual value is intrinsic and it doesn't satiate. Once discovered, it occasions us to seek after it in correlation to the Creator, the creation of new blessing. This is why women persuaded that their children are blessings sought more of them. They didn't want to be done, even if they had to wait a while. It's why great entrepreneurs continue building, even after they're wealthy. It's value, which is supernatural and immaterial. It's objectively a miracle that you're after. If you see it, and you see that you have agency in relation to such a miracle, you can't help but seek that out. Hannah connected the supernatural scale of values to creation somewhat explicitly. She said, where I was in my early 20s, and if you're somewhat level-headed in the world, you would say having children doesn't fit into this lifestyle. You couldn't do this. It doesn't make sense. Because people think on rational levels. And I think maybe a little bit more super rational thinking has to infiltrate the masses to know that things are possible, like possibilities of expansion in your life. She's a new person. She's a different person. Of her journey to have 9 children, Esther said along the way, she said, we've seen miracles. The women I met frequently referred to their children as miracles. Shaylee said, sometimes I want to shout it from the top of some very high place that I have all of these beautiful miracles. Leah described the miracle as a divine gift that no one else can bring. Would it be so odd to devote your life to bringing more divine gift into the world? She didn't think so. She told me she was having her 5th, failed to mention. She told me, there are times when I feel really overwhelmed and like this is a really big responsibility I'm bringing on my shoulders. Bringing another child, starting from square one at age 40. I could be doing this another 18 years. I could also be on the beach drinking margaritas. But that's just not what my life is about. And I just didn't build my life around sitting back and relaxing. I built my life around working really, really, really hard and bringing goodness and light into the world. If anything, she continued, children are light. Every child brings a divine gift into the world that nobody else can bring. Nobody else can do what that person is here to do. And yes, it takes so much self-sacrifice. But ultimately, I feel like my husband and I are really happy. Leah's seeing the supernatural value in her children, aligning herself with the giver and her willingness to receive more, brought about her 5th baby at the age of 40. And her story helps to elucidate why policy incentives haven't solved the low birth rate crisis. The engine for growth, for new creation, is seeing and seeking the intrinsic value in the child. For the women in this rare demographic, children are blessings from God, expressions of divine goodness and the purpose of marriage. They are convinced that the worthiness of having children proves itself over time in ways that evade human design and expectation. They believe in a greater wisdom of which children and human generation are a part. These are the reasons of the heart which are incentives for them, which tip the scales in favor of choosing another child. Their stories made it obvious why subsidies don't raise birth rates. Cash incentives can't answer what needs to be answered, which is a reason to postpone dreams that can't hang on past 1 or 2 children, like Leah's music career that she had placed on hold. We know that we can incentivize moving away from oil and cigarettes and big gulps. But can we incentivize moving away from careers and interests that women have prepared themselves to fulfill from their earliest school days? The narratives here suggest that such a choice has to come from deep within. It has to be wanted for its own sake and counted as worth the costs, which are personal and subjective. The stories also illustrated the falsehood of the assumption that religious women, I would sometimes call them religious outliers, have zero relevance for the revival of the family. Both Hannah and Leah went to ordinary 4-year liberal arts colleges in the Northeast. I should add secular colleges in the Northeast. They had grown up secular. They didn't come from large families, and they encountered as adults and then chose a lifestyle where, in their words, we are much more intentionally practicing religion than the traditional. Faith had been the catalyst for their births. They might have been pleased to receive more government benefits. I didn't ask them. But absent their religious convictions, such a credit would not have moved them to desire more children. That policy lesson is simple. The flourishing of traditional religious institutions breaks the low marriage and low fertility cycle. To conclude, to wrap up, gratitude, rightly understood, is a kind of engine of growth in a supernatural economy of gift. Like entrepreneurship, gratitude entails alertness to discovery of these gifts, which are everywhere, receptivity, and value creation. The grateful heart is alert to goodness she did not bring about, even though she might have paid something or it cost her something. The grateful heart notices that goodness in a good for her personally exceeds her efforts to obtain it. For market exchanges, to the persons whose work and effort coordinated to bring an item into being, and to God whose providence operates for her through secondary causes. Gratitude also enjoins us, binds us, to treasure as gift those who owe us some obligation in a familial relationship. The fact that my spouse owes me fidelity doesn't mean that I should take it for granted, right? On the contrary, gratitude compels me to see in the fidelity of my spouse a good beyond my merits, to see it as a miracle, to wish to repay it by being a fitting vessel for that gift, to thank God for the miracle of my spouse, and to turn receipt of such a gift into more blessing through my own fidelity and gifts of love and service. So gratitude practiced as an art makes us receivers and givers both, bound together in freedom and joy. Imagine, by contrast, the dull, disenchanted world of thinking everything we receive was already due to us. Not a miracle at all, just simply the ordinary deposit of what the universe owes me. We all know such persons. Not only are they proud and insufferable, they are miserable, to your point. They are not really happy, like Leah and her husband. They are constantly disappointed when the world measures up short. Whereas they ought to be constantly joyful that the bounty of the world turns up a storehouse of value when we hardly began to dig for it. Gratitude begins with noticing surplus, kind of extra value, what we received that was outside the balance of a market transaction or a familial obligation or the mere debt of nature. A rightly ordered response takes no thing for granted and creates something out of nothing. A more abundant economy, youthful marriages, more children, a world of color and dimension and enchantment. This world of gratitude, is the world of deep magic, I said, because we aren't passive in relation to it. This miracle that saves the world. We are active participants. This phrase, strangers and sojourners, not strangers and sojourners, more like conjurers. When I see that my spouse is not a disappointment, but rather a gift, because it's a miracle that anyone would give his life to me when I deserve hardly a shred of consideration. This is an act of discovery and creation, because there is an energy in this. I have to rise up and answer that gift. There's a power in my act of discovery. I have brought forth a new creation. Like the mother of Jesus says, my soul magnifies the Lord. That energy, that's energy. Now I'm going to sound a little new agey, but it's true. This is energy, and that's exquisite. It's the most powerful thing in the world. This is the energy that creates, it builds, it crosses mountains, it resists tyranny and discouragement, and it vanquishes the ultimate accuser. The accuser steals all possibility of surprise value, right? Because there's surprise value everywhere. Who steals it? The accuser. The accuser steals it by convincing us that we are gods and that all things are merely due to us. The accuser in turn steals wonder and admiration and thanks. He seeks to flatten the entire providential order, to distribute, in fact, to redistribute without asking where anything comes from, to flatten God by flattening his gifts and our cooperation with those gifts. But the world cannot sustain itself without this energy of gratitude. We are entering right now one of the oddest times of the year for Christians. The entire world wants to do what? They want to borrow the magic of Christmas. They are after the energy. What do they want? The energy of gift and creation over mere redistribution. Dare I call it regifting? They are after life over death, after enchantment over discouragement. How eagerly those bright lights go up in a jaded world seeking light in the bleak midwinter. But can there be gifts without a gift giver? Can there be gratitude without gifts? Can there be enchantment without gratitude? Ultimately, no. Our secular merrymakers may role play Christmas magic, but it has a really short life, doesn't it? December 26th brings disappointment and I think a kind of rage below the surface. Reality has not measured up. Put those trees away, take down the lights, change the music. Whereas we, with the eyes of faith, we know that the Christmas season begins when the world is disillusioned. We might look a little foolish playing our carols, protecting our dried up and crispy trees well into January, because we are the receivers, the hopers, the discoverers, the builders, the conjurers, delighting in the treasure of gift, the Christmas day that goes on all year, because the Christ child is who the angels declared him to be, because our children are what God promised them to be, because the universe is gift to us and not desert, because God called us forth and we will answer that energy. For this child I prayed, and lo, unto us a child is born. Thank you.